Question 1b. So this asks us to rotate triangle A, which is up here, 90 degrees clockwise. So remember, clockwise, think about which way a clock goes. It's going that way, about the point 0, 2. So let's first of all find the point 0, 2. That would be here. Let's mark that on. And we need to rotate this. So I've got some tracing paper. Now, you may be able to do this without tracing paper, but some of you would appreciate the tracing paper. So I'm just going to draw my triangle on. And I'm going to plot my point on here. Now, I always like to put a line up here so that I know how far I've gone when I start turning it round. So if I keep my pen on here and I turn this round, I can see when that arrow joins up to the straight line, I know where that point is going to be, and that is where I need to rotate my triangle. So I'm going to plot my points, keeping my piece of paper in line, and I know that is where it's going to be. So I can join this up. Like so. Now I always like to think, well, if I had rotated this, then I would have gone 90 degrees and it would have gone like that. Does it look like that? Yes, so that's fine. They've asked us to label it B, and I'm just going to check the dimensions. This is 2, that one was 2, this one is 3, that one is 3. So I'm fairly confident this one is right. So marks for question 1, nice and simple. You get 1 mark if you've stated that it's in reflection, and you get 1 mark if you have stated whether it is the y-axis or x equals 0. Either are absolutely fine. Question number 2. Question 2, it says that one day a supermarket has 8,420 customers. 65% of the customers pay with debit card, 1/5 of the customers pay with credit card, and the rest of the customers pay with cash. How many customers paid cash? So I want to work out how many 65% would be, and I want to work out how much a fifth would be, and then take that off the original to work out what I have left. Now this is a calculator paper. Some of you will like to use your calculator to be able to work these out. The first thing that we need to do is take the full amount, and we need to find 65%. Now there's lots of different ways of finding 65%. We can times it by 65 over 100. You may want to put this as a decimal. You may know how to do it on a calculator where actually you just do 65% of whatever number it was that you had originally, so 8,420, and that also will get you the answer. So there are lots of different ways of finding percentages. Just stick with the one that you're confident with. So that would give me 5,473, and that is how many are paying with debit card. That's the first thing I've worked out. The next thing I'm going to work out is 1/5 of the customers that are paying by credit card. Now, if I need to find a fifth, I'd like to think that we all know that we need to just divide by 5. So if I had 8,420, which was the original amount of customers, and I divide that by 5, again, I've got a calculator, so I can type this in nice and simply and get my answer of 1,684. Now, once I've got these two numbers, this tells me how many had paid with debit, how many had paid with credit. I need to work out how many are left. So the first thing I need to do is add these two numbers together to make sure that I know how many altogether had paid on card, and then I can use this to work out how many I had left over. So I'm going to get 7, and then I've got 15, so carry the 1. I've got 11, and then 7. So 7,157 between a debit card and a credit card. I now need to take this away from the original price. Obviously, you could use a calculator for these calculations, but I'm just showing you using non-calculator methods. Again, if you want to use your calculator, feel free. So I'm going to borrow from there, and I've got 10, so I'm going to get a 3. I'm going to have to borrow again, so I'm going to get 11 take away 5, which is 6. 3 take away 1, 2, and then I've got 1 left over. So my total amount of people that paid with cash is 1,263. Okay, that is how many paid with cash. Remember, you can check all of this on a calculator because it is a calculator paper. So the marks for question 2, you'd get 1 mark for being able to correctly find 65% of the original amount. You'd then get another mark if you found a fifth of the original amount, which would be the people who paid on credit card. Then you'd get a method mark for showing that you're trying to work out how to add them up so that you know how to work out the rest. And you'd get finally an answer mark for the final stage. So even if you are going to do these on a calculator, please make sure that you're at least writing down the sums that you're going to do so that you can still get a method mark even if you make a mistake. Question number 3 is a trial and improvement question. So I'm going to lay my workings with 3 different columns. The first one is just my value of x that I'm going to substitute in. My second one is the equation that I am trying to find a solution to, and my third column is a comment column. So the first thing that I need to do is work out, well, have they been kind enough to tell me what the numbers are between? And yes, they have. They've said that x is going to be between 3 and 4. They've also asked me to give my answer to 1 decimal place. So I'm first of all going to do a trial of 3 and work out what that would get me. So if I substitute in that x equals 3, I can write out that 3 squared plus 4 times 3, and I can work out what that's going to get me. So I can type this into my calculator, 3 to the power of 3, or 3 cubed, plus 4 lots of 3, and I can see what that equals, and that gets me 39. Now, my comment is whether that is too high or too small, and this one here is too small. I'm nowhere near the 60 at the moment. The next thing I'm going to try is the 4. So I'm going to again write this out, 4 cubed plus 4 times 4, and work out what that would get me. So I can go back through this and I can change where the 3's are, and I can make those into a 4. But again, if you're not very confident on a calculator, it's worth typing these in full. So I got 80 as my answer. That one is too big. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try halfway in between 3 and 4. If you don't know how to find halfway between two numbers, you can add them together and divide it by 2. But I know that that's going to be 3.5. So I'm going to do 3.5 cubed plus 4 times 3.5. Again, I'm going to go through and just change that on my calculator. Change that 4 to 3.5. Change that 4 to 3.5, making sure I don't change that 4 in the middle because that is part of the calculation. And I can press my SD button to get my exact answer, and that would be 56.875, and that is too small. It's getting a lot closer, but it's still too small. So I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go to my next 0.1 up. So I'm going to write it out again, 3.6 cubed times 4, plus 4, sorry, times 3.6. So I'm going to type this in again, 3.6 cubed plus 4 times 3.6, and I get my answer of 61.056. Now this one is too big. Now whenever you're looking at a trial and improvement question, you're always looking for two numbers that are 0.1 apart, where one of them is too small and one of them is too big, because one of those will now be my final answer. So I like to make a little mark next to them, so I know that one of them is going to be the final answer I'm putting on this line. But to work out which one of those, I don't just have a look at this and take a guess. I need to find the halfway point, which would be 3.55. So 3.55 cubed plus 4 times 3.55, and I can type that into my calculator to work out what that's going to get me. Again, I'm just changing this, but I'm then checking and making sure I haven't made any mistakes, and that gets me 58.93885. Now this one is too small, and the way I like to remember this, if this one is too small, this one is definitely too small, so it won't be that one, it therefore has to be 3.6. So my answer to one decimal place is 3.6. So the marks for this one, you can get 1 mark for doing the trials that they have stated. You can get another mark if you evaluate something that is in between 3.5 and 3.6, and you get 1 for making the decision mark about this one, and then a final answer mark for actually having your answer. So 1 for doing the 2 that they've already told you, another 1 for having 3.5 and 3.6, and then this one to tell you which one you're going to finally go with your answer. Okay, so question number 4. Lewis has a copper pipe with a length of 150 centimetres and a mass of 800 grams. So we're going to look at the relationship between the length and the mass. So for the first one, it is 150 centimetres, and the relationship with the mass would be that it's 800 grams. The second one, it says that we know that the length would be 90 centimetres, but we need to work out the mass. That's what we're trying to find. So we could find a multiplier between these, and then you do the same thing, which you can do this on your calculator. If you did 90 divided by 150, because those are the two that are on the top, then you can work out that that's actually been times by 0.6. So therefore we need to times by 0.6 on the bottom as well. So if I had 800 and I times it by 0.6, I'd get 480. So the mass would be 480. Now there are lots of other ways you can do this. If you're not that confident with a multiplier and not that confident with a calculator, you could have tried to do an extra step in between. How could you have got from 150 to something and then to 90? You may have noticed that these are both multiples of 30. You could have gone to 30 and then multiplied it back up. You may have wanted to do that. So the marks for this one are quite simple. If you've used a ratio to be able to express what we're doing, then you get 1 mark. Even if you've got them the other way around, it's absolutely fine as long as your 90 and your 150 line up. And the second mark is an answer mark for getting the correct answer of 480. Question number 5. Vicky makes 8 purses and 9 key rings to sell for charity. The price of a purse will be twice the amount of the price of a keyring. Vicky wants a total of exactly £40 when she sells all the purses and the keyrings. Work out the prices that Vicky needs to charge for each purse and each keyring. So the easiest thing to do here is to say that X is going to be the price of a keyring. Okay, and then we can solve this afterwards. Now if the price of the purse will be twice as much as the price of a keyring, then we could say that that would be 2x, because that is double X. Price of a purse. So if I'm going to try and form an equation that I'm then going to be able to solve, if I've got 8 purses and 9 key rings, first of all, if I've got my key rings, then they are x, so therefore I've got 9x. And if I've got my purses, I've got 8 of those, so that is 8 lots of 2x, and she wants that to equal £40. Don't know why, maybe it's a lucky number. So we've got 9x, and over here I've got 8 times by that 2x, so that's actually going to get me 16x, and that equals 40. So I'm going to simplify over here. 9x add 16x is going to get me 25x equals 40. I'm then going to divide by 25 on both sides. You could simplify this, you could use a calculator, it's up to you, but you'll get the answer of 1.6, which in monetary value, because remember this is all about the cost, that is the same as £1.60. So if that is the price of a keyring, how much is the purse going to be? Well, the purse was twice the amount of the keyring, so £1.60 times by 2. So let's just show that we're going to do 1.6 times 2, which gets me 3.2, which is actually £3.20. So we can say that £3.20 is the price of a purse. Make sure that you state really clearly, even if it's just with an arrow like this, to show which ones are the total answers for your workings. So you get 1 mark for beginning to form an equation and understanding that you could use the same variable because the relationship between them is just that one is double. You then get another mark if you equated that to 40 and started trying to solve. You then finally get an answer mark for being able to work out that this one would be 3.2 and showing that working. And finally you get a communication mark for having both of the answers clearly labelled which ones they are. So, question number 6. Mrs. Evans is planning a trip to the zoo. This is obviously my mother, not me, because I'm not married. She finds out this information. So, we've got all the off-peak in white, and then the peak in kind of grey, and then we've got all of the ticket prices. Now, the first thing it says is Mrs. Evans wants to go to the zoo on Friday the 17th of July. Friday the 17th is here. Is this off-peak or on-peak? It's off-peak. So, therefore, I am not interested in these at all, because it is off-peak. So, she will need to buy a ticket for 1 adult and 3 children. That's weird because there are actually 3 siblings three of us in my family. So 1 adult and 3 children. Miss Evans wants to buy the tickets as cheaply as possible. So there are some family offers going on here. Either 2 adults and 2 children, well that's not what's happening, or 1 adult and 3 children. That is what's happening. So she's going to be able to get 10% discount. Now you can either find 10% of these and then add them all up, but I think the easiest way of doing it is to work out the total for 1 adult and for 3 children, and then find the 10% and take off the discount. So 1 adult would be £19.50, and 3 children, well each child is £15, so if I do 15 times 3, that's going to get me £45. So the total cost, and this is before the discount, so, sorry I'll just move that up, total cost before discount would be £19.50, that's the adult, plus the £45, which are the children. Now, you may want to check these on your calculator instead if you're not feeling confident, but I know that's going to get me £64.50. So I then need to find 10%, because that is the discount. So I'm finding 10% of £64.50. Now, you may, again, want to use your calculator for this, but 10%, essentially the numbers are just shifting along one place because we are dividing by 10. So 10% is £6.45. So that is the saving that she is going to have. That's not how much she's going to pay, it is the saving. So we need to do the original price, take off the saving. Again, if you're not feeling confident, you can do that on your calculator, and you would get £58.05 as your final answer of how much money Miss Evans is going to have to spend going to the zoo. So the marks for question 6, you'd get 1 mark for working out the amount of money it would cost normally. 1 mark, for showing that you're going to work these out, and then working out the total discount gets you your second mark. Second mark is for the total amount before the discount. Finding the 10% is your third mark, and being able to take it off to get your answer mark would be your fourth mark. So question number 7 asks us to identify where the new school is going to be built. Now it says that it's less than 5 kilometres, which on this scale would be 5 centimetres from Alford, so it's over here somewhere, and it says that it needs to be nearer Bancroft than Alford, so it needs to be on this side a little bit. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is the less than 5 kilometres. So I need to open my compass up to 5 centimetres because that's what the scale will be, and then I need to draw a circle or an arc around where Alford is to show anywhere within that circle is within 5 kilometres. So that's the first piece of criteria dealt with. The next thing says it will need to be nearer Bancroft than Alford. So I'm going to open up my compass wider than halfway, and I'm going to do an arc at the top and an arc down the bottom. Then I'm going to keep my compass exactly the same, and I'm going to do an arc at the top that intersects that first arc I did, and an arc down the bottom that intersects the second arc I did. Now I know these lines are quite faint, they're quite difficult for you to see. Try and zoom in a little bit. And I will go over them with a felt tip in a moment. But once we've got those two lines, those two intersecting arcs in fact, we can put our pencil in between them and we can join them up. So from there to there, hopefully you'll be able to see that line a bit more clearly. From there to there, and then we've got our circle, which goes round and intersects here, goes all the way round to here. So the section that the school can be built in that fits with both criteria is this section here, because everything on this side of the line is closer to Bancroft than Alford, and everything within this circle is within 5 kilometres of Alford. Now remember that your booklet might be a smaller booklet, so it might not work out on your diagram. So this one, nice and simple, answers to number 7. Marks are as follows. If you have managed to show the circle, that is 1 mark. If you've managed to show the perpendicular bisector, and do try and make sure that your lines are visible, your guidelines, to make sure that it doesn't look like you've just had a guess, you would get another mark, and the final mark is for shading in the right area. Question number 8 is a Best Buy question. We've got 3 different things that we need to compare and work out which one is the best value for money. So you've got a 70ml tube of toothpaste costing £1.79, you've got a 100ml tube of toothpaste costing £2.75, and a 150ml tube of toothpaste costing £3.99. So I'm just going to split my page, first of all, into 3 different columns so that I can clearly show my working. Now I want to find how much it would be per milliliter. Okay, I think that's the easiest way of doing this. So per milliliter, we're going to work them out. So this first one, I'm just going to write down the information that I've got. It's 70 millilitres, and that costs £1.79. The second one that I'm going to use in this column is 100 millilitres, and that costs £2.75. And the third one is 150 millilitres, and that costs £3.99. Now I want to know the price per milliliter for each of these so that I can compare them. It doesn't matter whether you find milliliter, whether you find it per penny, or whether you find it per 100 millilitres, or any other amount, as long as you do the same thing in each so that you can compare them. So the first thing I'm going to do is, because these are all pounds and there's decimals in all of them, I'm going to change them into pennies, just to make my life easier. So I'm going to call that 179p. I'm going to call this one 275p. And over here, I'm going to change this one as well to 399p. Now sometimes on a question like this you might have some that are in pennies and some that are in pounds. Make sure that you just got them all in the same units, okay? You don't have to change them, I just think it's easier. So I always take the amount of the price and divide it by the amount that I am getting, because I don't want 70 millilitres, I want 1 milliliter. And to get 1 from 70, I need to divide by 70. So I'm taking the cost, which is 179 pennies, and I'm dividing it by 70. Over here I'm going to take the cost, 275, divide it by 100, and the final one, I'm going to do 399, divide that by 150. Now obviously you can plug all of these into your calculator and you would get 2.5571 and so on. And over here you would get 2.75, that one's a nice and easy one for us to do. And this final one you get 2.6 recurring. So we now need to look at all of these and we need to work out which one is the best value. So therefore we need to work out the smallest amount of money per milliliter. This number here is the smallest out of the 3, so therefore I can safely say, and I'm going to use my dots to say therefore, the 70 milliliter tube is the best value for money. Okay, and make sure you always state really clearly which one you're going with. Okay, the marks for question number 8. The first mark is for being able to show that you can find one of these. It doesn't matter which one you do first, but if you get one right, you already get your first mark. You get your second mark if you manage to find all 3 correct, and that is showing your method for all 3. So even if your answers end up wrong, you can still get both of those marks for the correct method. You then get an answer mark if all 3 of these are correct, and you get a communication mark for being able to state which one is actually the best value for money. Okay, question number 9. They would like you to complete the table of values first of all. So if we want to complete the table of values for x squared minus 5x plus 3, all we're going to do is plug these values in. Be careful if you are going to use your calculator when you're doing negatives. It's quite easy to make mistakes, so make sure you put brackets around your negatives if you're going to do that. So when I plug in minus 1, I'm going to end up with 9. When I plug in 2, I'm going to end up with negative 3. 4, I'm going to get negative 1, and we've already got the other ones in there, okay? So then it asks me to draw the graph. Now, don't be fooled, this is part of the same question. We are going to use this information to plot our graph. So the first one I'm going along, minus 1, and I'm going up to 9. So I'm going to plot my point, Again, be careful on scales. I see this wrong all the time. We're going along to... Okay, so the marks so far on question 9 are that you would get 2 marks for getting that entire table correct, and you would get 1 mark if you had have got just the one right. Okay, so even if you'd have made a mistake on the other ones, if you'd got 1 right, you still could have picked up 1 mark. Down here, you get 1 mark for all points being plotted, and then you get another mark for the smooth curve that goes through and joins them all up. You can get a follow-through mark on this. If you have made up some random values up here but then plotted them correctly, you can still pick up one of the method marks there. Question number 16. Jane has a flower bed in the shape of an equilateral triangle. The perimeter of the flower bed is 15 metres. Work out the area. So at the moment they've given us perimeter, which is around the outside, and they want us to work out the area of the flower bed. Give your answer correct to 1 decimal place. So they haven't given me a diagram, but I'm going to draw one just to help me. So it's an equilateral triangle, therefore all the sides are the same, all the angles must be the same, they must all be 60 degrees, so I can label that on. Now, they've told us that the perimeter is 15 metres. Well, if all the sides are the same, then simply I can do 15 divided by 3 to work out that all of the sides must be 5 metres. So what I've got here is a triangle where I know the sides and I know the angle, but I need to work out what the area is. Now, there are 2 different ways of doing this. I could split it down the middle, and I could use Pythagoras' theorem to find the missing side and find the area that way. Or, alternatively, if I look at my the first page of my exam paper, I've got a formula page which tells me that an area of a triangle is half AB sine C. So if this side was A and this side was B, then sine C would be the angle that's enclosed by them because it's the opposite one to the length that would be labelled C. So I'm going to use this formula to be able to find the area of my triangle. So A and B are both going to be 5, so I'm just going to substitute those values in, and sine C, well, the angles will always be 60, so I can type in this into my calculator. So half times 5 times 5 times sine of 60, close my bracket off, and I get an answer of 10.8 and so on. So I'm going to first of all write down everything that I've got on my screen, and then I'm going to check. The question asked me 1 decimal place, so that would get me 10.8 to 1 decimal place. And remember, this is area, so I'm going to write metres squared. It is on the answer line, but it's always worth putting your units on. Second part of this question. So again, I'm going to be using one of the formulas that I've got, but let's read the question first. Jane has some containers in the shape of hemispheres, so that's half a sphere, if you didn't know that. Half a sphere. Think about the northern and southern hemisphere, if you do geography, with a diameter of 35 centimetres. So that is the diameter. Therefore, we may need the radius, which would be half of that. We'll have a little look. Jane is going to fill the containers completely with compost. She has 80 litres of compost. 1 litre is 1,000 centimetres cubed. Work out how many containers Jane can fill completely with compost. So, again, looking at the formula page, if I don't know this off the top of my head, volume of a sphere, okay, and that would be the whole thing. At the moment, this is just the hemisphere, so we'll worry about that in a second, is 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay, so that's a formula you don't have to necessarily learn because it is at the beginning of your test, but make sure that you are using your formula page. So, if I wanted to find the volume of the whole sphere at the moment, I'm going to do 4/3 pi, and then the radius, well, if that's the diameter, I need to divide it by 2, and therefore I would get 17.5 centimetres. So I'm going to need to times it by 17.5 cubed. So I'm going to type this into my calculator. I've got 4/3 times pi times 17.5 to the power of 3. So there's my answer for that one, and it might be worth writing it down at this point, although I am going to keep my answer on my calculator so I don't end up doing any unnecessary rounding at this point. Now, if that's the whole sphere, well, they're not a whole sphere, they're only half a sphere, so I need to find the hemisphere. And to find the volume of the hemisphere, I just need to take this number and divide it by 2. So I can either write all of that over 2, or I can write that I'm going to times by 1/2. So I'm just going to rewrite out my formula so it's really clear to any examiner what I am doing. And I'm going to times this by 1/2, which is the same as dividing by 2. So once I've got this, I can write down that the volume of my hemisphere is 11,224,648,75. Now, going back to this, we've got 80 litres of compost, and each litre is 1,000 centimetres cubed. So we need to make sure that we can do 80 times by the 1,000, which I'd like to think that we're all capable of doing, but again, you've got a calculator if you need to check it. We then need to take the amount of compost she's got and divide it by the amount of space that she has. So if we take our 80,000 and we divide it by our number over here, so 11,224.648, 0.64875. Remembering I've actually got that saved on my calculator still, so I can do 80,000 divided by the answer. Okay, that answer button down the bottom just saves whatever you last did, and then when I divide that, I get an answer of 7.1271171796. Now, remembering this says work out how many containers Jane can fill. Well, she can fill 7.12 and so on. So therefore, she can fill 7 and a little bit more, but how many full containers? It would be 7. So she can fill 7 containers. And just make sure it's very clear what your final answer is. So the marks for number 16 are as follows. You would get 1 mark for using this triangle appropriately, whether you were splitting it in half and using it using Pythagoras to find it, or whether you were doing this, it doesn't make any difference. You'd get 1 mark for substituting in all the values correct, and then you'd get a final answer mark for actually getting the answer right to 1 decimal place. Down the bottom, you would get 1 mark for substituting the values in correctly, and remembering that it's a hemisphere, not a sphere that you're trying to find. You'd then get another mark if they could see that you were able to substitute them in properly and get the right answer. Then you get 1 mark for showing that you understand you need to divide how much compost she's got by the space she's got. And then finally an answer mark for being able to round appropriately to say she can fill 7 containers. Okay, question number 17 asks us to make x the subject of the formula. Now the reason this one is coming up much later in the paper is because you've got an x squared on the top and an x squared on the bottom, so it's going to be quite a bit of rearranging that we need to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by the whole of this bottom bracket to get rid of it because we don't want it over there. So I'm going to write down times by, and I'm going to times by this whole bracket, x squared minus 7 on that side, and I'm going to write it over here as well, x squared minus 7. Now if I times by it and divide by it, they're going to cancel, and over here I'd end up with y, and then this whole bracket, and on this side I've just got left my x squared plus 9 that was on the top. Now the first thing I'd do is I'd expand this bracket out, so I've got x squared y when I times those two together, and I've got minus 7y. Over here I've got my x squared plus 9. Now I want to get all of my x's on one side, and I only want x's on that side. So the first thing I'm going to do is move across this x squared over here. So I'm going to take x squared off both sides. So I've got x squared y minus 7y, and then minus an x squared. And now over here I just have 9. The next thing I'm going to do is, because I've got x's here and here, this is the only part that doesn't have an x in. So I'm going to add 7y to both sides of my equation. So I'm left with x squared y minus x squared, and on this side I've got 9 plus 7y. The next thing I need to do, and this is the trickiest part really, is identifying that I can factorise, and I can factorise x squared. I can pull it out both of those because it's a common factor. So if I put that on the outside of my bracket, I'm going to end up with y minus 1 on the inside, and over here I've still got my 9 plus 7y. Now I then need to divide both sides by this bracket so that I can get rid of it on the left hand side. That will cancel with that, so I'm just left with my x squared. Over here I've got 9 plus 7y over y minus 1, and then final step is that I want just x by itself, so I need to do the square root of both sides, and I would end up with the square root of 9 plus 7y over y minus 1. Now you may want to put these in brackets just to make it clear and make sure that that division line covers the whole of that. Okay? Marks for question 17 are as follows. You would get 1 mark for identifying that you needed to eliminate that bracket by multiplying on both sides. You then get another one for trying to get all of the x's onto one side, so when you get down to here you'd have another one. Your next mark is for then factorising and understanding that you can pull that out as a common factor, and your final mark is an answer mark for getting all the way to the bottom. Question number 18. Not only is it circle theorems question where we normally have to explain what we're doing, but it also has that asterisk up there, so we need to make sure that we are explaining in full what it is we're doing and which angle rules we are using. So, which angle are we trying to find? Well, they've labelled it x for us, so this is the one we're trying to find. Now, the first thing that jumps to mind for me, my favourite circle theorem rule, is that this angle is always twice this angle. The angle at the centre is twice the angle at the circumference. So if I can find this angle, I know I can easily find that one. Now, the next rule that jumps to mind, now that I'm looking at this angle and the one that they have given me, is that in a quadrilateral that's in a circle, the opposite angles are always 180 degrees. So if I know that one, I can work out that one. So lots of different ways that you can tackle this question. The first thing I would do is I would state my rule that those opposite angles in the quadrilateral, they add to 180. Now I'm going to use that rule, so I'm going to say, well, 180 take away the 116, that will give me angle ADC. So that gives me 64 degrees, so angle ADC, therefore AGC is 64, so I can label that on here if I wish. The second rule that I'm going to use then is that the angle at the centre is double the angle at the circumference. So I'm going to state my rule. Angle at the centre is twice or double the angle at the circumference. Okay, so therefore I need to take that angle, 64, and I'm going to need to times it by 2, which will get me 128 degrees. So therefore I can say x equals 128 degrees. Okay? Marks for question 18. Essentially, there are 2 communication marks and 2 method marks. So, well, 1 method, 1 answer mark. So you would get a communication mark for stating your rule and a method mark for being able to work out that angle that's on the way to what you want to find. Then you get another communication mark for stating your rule, and then you finally would get an answer mark. It doesn't make any difference if you state your answer before your rule or your rule before your answer. I quite like to state the rule I'm going to use and then show how I'm using it, but I know some people will prefer to do their working and then state the angle rule that they're using. Okay, question number 19. This is a vector question. The first part of a vector question is normally quite straightforward, hence why it's worth 1 mark, and then the second part is a little bit more complex. So write down the vector of A, B. So we're trying to get from here to here. Now, if we go from A to B, this road is labelled and this road is labelled, but this one is not, so we have to go via O. So, therefore, I would need to go backwards, because this road is pointing this way, so it's actually going to be a minus A. And then I need to come down this path, which is a plus B. So you could leave your answer as this, or you could write it as B minus A, if you prefer to not have a negative starting it. It's more correct. But both are fine. The second part of this says that X is a point on AB, yeah, we can see that, and it says such that AX, this part here, and XB are in the ratio of 1 to 4. So if they're in the ratio of 1 to 4, the first thing I'm thinking is how many is that out of? Well, 1 add 4 makes 5, so that whole part there is out of 5, and the first part is just one part of it, so that would be a fifth, and this part would be 4/5. So that's the first way I like to look at it. Then it says we're going to express the vector OX, so we're trying to go from here to here in terms of A and B. So the first thing I'm going to do is write down the vectors that I would have to add together. So OX, and this is always a good way to start because you can often pick up a mark even if you don't know what you're going to do with them. OX is going to be OA, so along that top part, and then add on AX. Always worth doing even if you don't know how on earth you're going to find these. So OA, well, OA is just A. That's nice and simple. AX, however, that's a bit more complicated because that path is not labelled. So we actually need to go along here and then back. So the way that we need to do this is we need to work out how we're going to do a fifth of this. So the first part, the OA part, that was nice and simple. We just got A. So I'll write that down. And then we're going to need to do a fifth of the journey that we'd already worked out from A to B because we want a fifth of that path. Okay, so I'm putting a fifth down and then I'm just going to write down what I had on the line above, so B minus A from part 1 up here. Now I'm going to expand this bracket, so I get A plus, then that's going to get me 1/5 of B minus, and that is 1/5 of A. Now I can see that I can simplify this. If I've got A and I take away a fifth of A, well that's going to leave me with 4/5 of A, and I've still got my 1/5 of B. Now it doesn't matter too much about how you've expanded it out, but you do need to try and show that you are capable of collecting those like terms at the same time. Okay, the marks for question 19, quite simply either of these will be fine. They're an answer mark for the first part. The second part, a bit more complicated. Again, as I said, if you have stated that you are going to try and do this, you can pick up a method mark without actually doing any of those things. You then get 1 method mark for working out that it is a fifth of B minus A, and then another one for getting all the way to your answer down at the bottom. Question number 20 asks us to solve by factorising. Now this is quite a nasty one to end on, but it's only worth 3 marks. So, because we've got an 8 as a coefficient, this could be that we've got 8 and a 1 as our coefficients in our brackets, or it could be that we've got a 4 and a 2. Now, looking at the other numbers, because this number is quite close to this number, I'm going to stick with the 4 and the 2 first to give it a go, because 8 and 1 would produce numbers that are further apart. So, if I had my brackets, and I went with 4x and 2x. Now that's the first thing that I'm looking at. The second thing I'm going to look at is this minus 27. So that tells me that one of the symbols is going to be positive and one is going to be negative because I've got a negative on the end. So 27, well the first thing I can think of is 9 times 3. That gets me 27. Okay, there's not that many other factors. I could have 1 and 27, but that's probably going to be quite unlikely because these numbers that I've got. So if I was going to use 9 and 3, first of all, if I put the 9 here, then the 9 would end up being times by the 2, and that would get me an 18 or a minus 18, and the 4 would end up times by the 3, which is going to get me 12. Now, I need to think about whether I'm going to be able to make minus 30 if one of them is positive and one of them is negative. Now, if one's positive and one's negative, I need to make sure that the numbers are going to be greater than 30. Less than minus 30, so that I'm going to be able to expand it and it will be correct. So if I put the 9 here, however, then I would be able to get 36 from my 4 times 9, and then I'd be able to get 6 here. Now 36 and 6 are going to be able to get me minus 30 quite easily. So if I put my negative 9 here, and I put my positive 3, well, it's always worth just double checking by expanding your set of brackets to make sure that you haven't made any mistakes, especially in a question like this, because it's very easy to do a lot of trial and improvement. So I would get 8x squared, I'd then get minus 36x plus 6x minus 27, and I can see quite clearly that those two are going to get me my minus 30x, so I know I've got it right. So that's just a little side note. So I now need to solve. Now what I mean by that is equate each of these to 0. So I'm going to do one over here, and that is 4x plus 3 equals 0, and then the other one over here, 2x minus 9 equals 0. So the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to take away 3 from both sides. So I've got 4x equals negative 3, and then I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. So I've got x equals, just go down a little bit, x equals minus 3/4. Now you could have written that as minus 0.75, doesn't make any difference, either answer is absolutely fine. Over here I'm going to add 9 to both sides, so I've got 2x equals 9, then I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides, so I've got x equals 4.5. Those are my two values of x that I'm going to put down as my final answer. So the marks for this, there are 3 marks up for grabs. You would get 2 marks if you got both of these correct. You would get 1 mark if you had the numbers correct but you had the signs the wrong way, which is why it's always worth checking, because you'd have worked out if you'd have got the signs the wrong way around. And then you get an answer mark for having your 2 values of x.